Hello everybody, Ignatius Jackson CPA here with another important update for you regarding the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. So this is the new bill that was passed on June the 5th, signed into law on June the 5th, passed by Congress shortly before that. And so this is a great video in regards to some great changes to the Paycheck Protection Program that should ultimately make basically every business that got these loans pretty much eligible for full forgiveness based on some of the rule changes that they came out with for this Paycheck Protection Program. So definitely listen in if you have a loan. If you don't have a loan, you basically have only until tomorrow to basically apply for it and get it. I do know there are some lenders that are trying to get as many business owners as possible these loans completed tonight and tomorrow. So definitely go through and do what you can to apply if you still want one. There's billions of dollars still left, as far as I know. As of sometime last week, there was a stat that there's still billions of dollars left. So at this point, there's not clear if they're going to extend that deadline at all. Not very likely, but we'll see. You never know. They've done a lot of changes and did a lot of things, so anything's possible, I suppose. But ultimately, today's video is about Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act. And so some of the changes that they made with this act is basically now you can use a 24-week time period instead of only 8 weeks. So the 8-week time period was definitely a huge hurdle for a lot of businesses, especially those that weren't able to open and weren't really able to operate. And so, having this 24-week time period is going to be a great benefit to a lot of business owners, especially those that, like I said, were basically shut down by the government. If you received your Paycheck Protection Program loan before June the 5th, you also get the opportunity to choose whether you want to do the 8-week time period or the 24-week time period. So you basically get the choice. You can do 8 weeks or 24 weeks as your covered period. Now that said, more likely than not, doing 8 weeks is not going to be beneficial to you in most cases. So strongly recommend that most taxpayers consider doing the 24-week time period to really help you out in that regard. If you also another thing that they changed is the percentage. So basically, instead of the 75% payroll rule that was kind of informal rule that the SBA came up with, wasn't really in the law. They kind of came up with it after the fact. Well, Congress said, you know what, we're actually going to make it 60% of the costs that are forgiven need to be payroll-related costs. So now it's actually in the law, so the SBA can't change that. So basically, 60% of payroll costs is the threshold. As long as you use, so let's say you get a loan of $100,000, you just need to use at least $60,000 worth on payroll in order to make sure that you get the full forgiveness amount. So really good benefit there. Additional change that was made in regards to the PPP loan is that if your business was basically forced to shut down by governmental order, like you're in the beauty space or you're in restaurant space, things like that, where you basically couldn't operate, they're not going to ding you for the full-time equivalent reduction. So if you use the money to pay payroll costs and you didn't quite have as many full-time equivalents, they just came out and decided they're not going to ding you for that. You still will get the full forgiveness amount as long as you use the payroll costs, the money for eligible costs, in the covered time period. So you still have to use the money, you just don't necessarily have to keep the same level of employees. So for example, you could, if you had 20 full-time equivalents before all this happened, and there's a certain date that you have to look at to determine if you qualify for this. That hasn't really changed. But if you only had 20 employees before and now you only have 10, under the current rules or the old rules, you basically would have got 50% of your forgiveness basically reduced in a sense. Now you can still qualify for 100% as long as you had a governmental order in place. Okay. So, like I said, with some of these changes, hopefully most people will qualify for the full forgiveness amount. The one exception to that would be if you got a EIDL loan, the emergency injury or economic injury disaster loan. So that if you received one of those grants, so it was the up to $10,000 grant that they were offering, then you technically are not eligible for full forgiveness. You have to reduce the forgiveness amount under the PPP loan by the amount of the grant that you received. So if you got a $5,000 grant and you got a $100,000 PPP loan, the most you can get forgiven under the PPP loan is $95,000. So they did not change that rule with this update to the program. And given the change in the covered period, they did come out with a rule. The SBA came out with an additional rule that said, before this, they were basically saying you can't pay an owner-employee more than 8 50-seconds of their 2019 compensation. Well, now they came out and said you can't pay them more than 2.5 times their monthly compensation if you're doing the 24-week time period. So, which in essence, if you think about it, equates to how much of a loan amount you were getting based on your 2019 compensation. So it kind of makes sense in a sense in terms of what they're doing there. So they don't want to give you any more benefit than what you would have gotten if you had kept all your employees employed and everything like that. So I kind of understand what they're doing there. Makes sense, but you basically get to get full credit for the loan amount that you received. So the maximum amount that you can pay yourself is $20,833 if you're owner employee. But again, it's limited to only 2.5 times your 2019 compensation. So if you were below $100,000 on your 2019 compensation, then you still can't get the maximum amount. You have to reduce it by whatever your actual compensation was. Under the 8-week time period, the maximum you can pay yourself is still $15,385. Okay. For non-owner employees, so like your staff and managers and everybody else that works for you, the maximum that you could pay them now under the 24-week time period is $46,154 per employee. And if you use the 8-week time period, that still remains at $15,385. So depending on what period you use, the amount that you could pay a particular employee has went up, including the owner employees. Okay. If you choose to do the 24-week period, just keep in mind that if you do the 24-week period and you apply for forgiveness early, so let's say you're only 12 weeks into the 24-week period and you apply for forgiveness and it comes out that you actually did reduce your full-time equivalents, or you had a salary reduction and you didn't really realize it based on the calculations, well, ultimately you're not going to be able to apply for the restoration provisions. So there's certain provisions that allow you to come up to a certain amount by a certain date, which is the end of the year, essentially December 31st. And if you rehire enough employees by that date, then you still get the full forgiveness even though you didn't have them all there during the covered period. So just be careful. Make sure you're working with someone that really understands the rules. Make sure that you fully understand exactly how much you incurred in terms of payroll costs, and that you fully are eligible for full forgiveness before you apply, just to make sure that everything is on the up and up and you don't get screwed in the end. So they did come out with that little word of caution. The SBA has also stated that health insurance contributions, they basically reconfirmed this, health insurance contributions, okay, are not allowed to be included in S corporation owners' compensation costs, okay, but you can include employer contributions to the S corporation owner. So for example, let's say that the S corporation owner made $100,000 last year or greater, you could still pay them the maximum amount under that scenario, plus their portion of the employer contributions to their 401k or SEP IRA or whatever it is that they normally would receive. But that said, you can't like give a greater amount than what you normally would have received based on that compensation during that time period. So you still have to be reasonable in terms of what you're doing there. They also modified the application to basically allow for an EZ form of the application instead of that big, long, massive form. So most small businesses that got these will usually qualify for the EZ form because they don't have any employees. So if you don't have any employees, you automatically are eligible to do the EZ form. If the only employee is you, the owner, you're eligible to do the EZ form. So for example, C Corps, not C Corps, S Corps, well, C Corps, yes, as well. S Corps, C Corps, and Schedule Cs that basically only have the owner employee on there. You get to basically do the EZ form. It's very easy to do. I'd still recommend just, touching base with your accountant or tax assist preparer, or whoever kind of helps you out that's somewhat familiar with it, just to kind of double check and make sure. But for the most part, it's so easy that you probably could do it yourself, honestly. Additionally, if you have not reduced the rate of pay for any of your employees, so let's say you do have employees and you haven't reduced the rate of pay and you haven't reduced the full-time equivalents, you can also do the EZ form, okay? And additionally, if you did reduce the full-time equivalents but you qualify for an exception to the reduction in full-time equivalents, then you can still do the EZ form as well. So definitely gave you the opportunity to do some of these more simpler forms. It doesn't have all the detailed calculations on there, things like that. So hopefully it makes the process for applying for forgiveness a little bit easier. But we'll see. Once you kind of get in there and start doing some of these is where you really determine whether it's going to be easy or not, right? A payroll tax deferral, another cool thing that they did with this, you can actually do the payroll tax deferral for the Social Security portion of employer taxes for the rest of this year, even if you get Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness. So prior to this, if you got the forgiveness under the PPP loan, you could not do the deferral of payroll taxes after the date that you received forgiveness. So basically you were kind of stuck with only doing it through the time that you got the forgiveness on the loan. The great thing about this is, if you don't know, if you're not familiar with this, I've said this before in other videos, but the employer portion of payroll taxes is not included in payroll costs that you can have forgiven. So that's coming out of your pocket as it is right now. And so by doing the payroll tax deferral, you're actually able to punt that down the line and save yourself some cash flow right now and pay 50% of it during December 31st of 2021 by December 31st of 2021, and the other 50% by December 31st of 2022. So it's a great combination to do the Paycheck Protection Program loan forgiveness in addition to the employee payroll tax deferral. And not to also to mention, the employee payroll tax deferral is also able to be used after you get the PPP loan forgiveness. So even after you use all the funds from the Paycheck Protection Program and you still have employment taxes that you're paying, you can still use the forgiveness calculation even after all that as well. So I think that's really an awesome change that they made as well. And that's essentially a tax-free loan if you think about it. There's no interest on it, there's no penalties for paying late. It's essentially an interest-free loan that you're punting down the line to 2021 and 2022, okay? And just an important update as well, they did finally come out and say that they are going to publish the names of people who received, I shouldn't say people, businesses that received the Paycheck Protection Program. Okay, so they are going to publish those names. If you got a loan greater than $150,000, you can expect to see your business on some website or some database somewhere that shows your name. I think they were going to say your name, city, state. I'm not sure if they're going to put the actual address or not, but definitely name, city, state, address, phone number potentially. So they're going to basically have your information out there for people to see in terms of who got these loans. If you're under that $150,000, they're not going to publish your name, and they're not going to publish any information about you. I think the intention there is it was just not in the public interest to let people know all the smaller businesses, that mom and pop shops, things like that got these loans. Most people are concerned about the higher end businesses that ended up getting these loans. So I think that's a good ideal there to publish those names. And so that's really the update here. So like I said, a lot of positive changes in my opinion. I think it's going to help make this forgiveness process a lot easier. There's still a lot of people who didn't apply for these loans, I feel like, because they were afraid of it or scared. Hopefully, they can do like a round 2 or something like that, and we can really get the word out to any businesses that are really struggling still. But for the time being, it's going to end tomorrow, like I said, June 30th. So, go ahead and apply if you can between now and then. Otherwise, hopefully they'll do a round 2. And if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to leave a comment, shoot us a message, anything like that. We'll do our best to answer any questions you have. Okay. Hope everybody has a good night. Bye.